How to use sources in the Homeric World topic. For the OCR Classical Civilisation GCSE Homeric World topic, you are expected to know about the prescribed sources, see the other videos, and use them to support your ideas about what aspects of the Mycenaean world were like. However, it also states in the specification that you will be credited for any sources you use. The different topics within the Homeric World topic are the key sites, for which the evidence is the sites of Mycenae, Tiryns and Troy, and to an extent Pylos. Life in the Mycenaean world, where we have evidence for palaces, hunting, armour and weapons, chariots, clothing, trade and Linear B tablets. Decorative arts, for which the evidence is the techniques used to create the frescoes, the jewellery, the storage vessels and figures and objects found from the period. And then finally, tombs, graves and burial, for which the evidence is the type of graves, cyst, shaft, tholoi, chamber tombs and the grave goods found within each. So what types of question will there be in Homeric World? Well, I can't exactly predict them, but overall you'll have source questions, short answer questions, where you'll be shown a source or reminded of a source, and you'll be asked, what is it? What is it made from? And maybe how was it made? What techniques were used? Where was it found, if we know that information? And most importantly, what does it tell us about the Mycenaeans and what are its limitations as a piece of evidence? Also, how does it compare to other sources of the same type? Does it have particular areas that are different or useful? And how is it impressive, perhaps? So the last two sections are really about your knowledge of the other sources, organised by the topics for each section. And the different sections are life in the Mycenaean world, with evidence of hunting, armour, chariots, clothing, trade, palaces and Linear B tablets. The decorative arts, with frescoes, jewellery, decorative objects, such as drinking vessels, human figures, animal figures, votive offerings and ivory carving. Tombs, graves and burial, so the burial customs, the structure and use of cyst graves and of tholos tombs and chamber tombs and shaft graves, the use of funerary objects and the contents of the graves of grave circle A and grave circle B at Mycenae. And then we come to this idea about how is it impressive? So what material are they made from? Did that involve a really amazing amount of craftsmanship? How about the design? Is it particularly interesting or cleverly done? And the execution of both of those and the position in which perhaps it was found or would have been originally. Does it create an impressive effect when viewed? Now, longer questions, the essay questions that are 15 marks, will be along these kind of lines. So what was life like in Mycenae or Tiryns or citadels in general? For example, was it private? Was it safe? Was it religious? Was it organised? What was it like to be a person in the Mycenaean age, a specific type of person perhaps? For example, what might they have worn? What did they do? What activities did they complete? And things like how impressive are the palaces or tombs or citadels of the Mycenaean world, such as how were they built, what were they made from, what do they contain, what were they used for, how were they used? And of course, these all sound like they're asking your opinion, but they're not. They're asking for you to give your knowledge. So how do you answer these? Well, you used your prescribed sources, the site of Mycenae, the site of Tiryns, the site of Troy, and all the evidence that you've looked at, and the decorative arts and the burial customs and so forth. And you look at all other sources you might have seen that are relevant, perhaps from the textbook or from your own learning or your own revision, or even having visited these sites and looked in the museums. So to give you some idea, for example, how you might answer some of the questions using sources, let's start with the key sites. So here we've got the images in front of you that are, the top two are the plans of Mycenae and Tiryns, and these are quite old ones because I've got them from Wikipedia so that they're free to use and I'm not breaching copyright. And underneath we've got photographs of the landscape of what they look like now, Mycenae on the left and Tiryns on the right. Now, how you use these sources, when you're in an exam or when you're answering a question, first of all, visualise the plan, right? Look around the whole thing and then zoom in on the individual details. That will allow you to look at the whole thing without missing anything out. Imagine you're walking up to it, perhaps, And think about where that citadel is actually located in the wider area. Is it, like Mycenae, up towards the mountains with a ravine around it and mountains preventing anyone from coming up from behind, with a great big view downhill towards the plains and the sea? Or is it like Tiryns, generally on flat land, although it itself is on a low hill, again with a view out to sea? So imagine approaching the citadel both as a resident or as someone who is going to live in the citadel because the area is being attacked, or as an attacker. So think, what will protect you as a resident or a refugee, or what will actually be used to defend against you? Finally, think about, what does it look like now? For example, what parts of it are still in existence and have impressively lasted this long, despite lack of use or maybe even reuse over the years? That will give you a really good overview of the entire source and give you lots to write about. If we think about the site of Troy, really you should try and envision the layers of Troy, because that's really what the focus is here. So again, visualize the plan. Think about where the site is located in the wider area. Don't forget how Schliemann apparently found it by using the Iliad like a treasure map, looking for the Xanthus and Simois rivers and how far it might have been from the existing coastline of the time. Then think about what evidence is there at each layer of Troy for it being Homer's Troy. Think about what you'll have learned about what is found at each layer and which version of Troy is most likely to have been the Homer's Troy because of evidence of warfare, perhaps, and how it was to be destroyed. And then think about what evidence is there for the site continually being important after this. Here in this diagram, you can see a cutaway of each level of Troy right up to a Roman Troy. You can see there a temple on the site. It's clearly still really, really important. You might also know that the Emperor Claudius stopped Troy from having to pay any taxes because it was for the motherland, as it were. So things like that will really get you thinking about what evidence is there of Mycenaean Troy, and perhaps even linking that to the Iliad, the Homeric tale. Now let's think about the evidence for the palaces. Now the palaces are the central parts. They are in the citadel, but they tend to be on the Acropolis. You've got that on both Mycenae and in Tiryns, and they're both quite complex buildings. So again, visualise the plan of the citadels and focus on where the palace was, and then think about what types of buildings and rooms were found near the palace, and also inside the citadel in general. Now we've got a better idea of that with Mycenae, where as you enter through the Lion Gate, you pass by the granary and then Grave Circle A, and then you've got houses and craft workshops as well. And then as you go higher and higher up into the city, up the ramp, you get to the actual palace up there on the Acropolis. With Tiryns, you enter up the Cyclopean ramp at the rear. You go through the gates, what will become killing boxes when it's under siege, past the galleries, through the courtyards, and then into the palace. We've got much more of a maze of rooms here, which all seem to be palace adjacent. And at the centre of both palaces are the Megarons, which we'll look at on the next page. So have a think about, what do these suggest about the palace's usage? It's higher up. We know that the palaces would have had more than one floor, so they'd have great views over the surrounding countryside and the rest of the kingdom. They're also central, so they're harder to get to because you have to go uphill, and they're also got the most important rooms, the Megaron, right at the heart of the palace. You've got to get through a lot of the rest of the palace in order to get there. Then they tend to be surrounded by rooms that have specific usage, like oil press rooms or the archives where they would have kept Linear B tablets. So these suggest that they are hives of industry. They've got particular people with particular jobs working within them. Let's look at these Megarons. Here I've put the Megarons of Mycenae and Pylos and Tiryns together, the plans of them, along with these fabulous reconstructed illustrations of what they may have looked like based on the fresco evidence. So we can see that they all follow the same kind of plan. So again, we're going to visualize this plan of the Megaron and think about what are its features. So first of all, you enter into a porch with 2 columns. Then you go through a door into an anteroom, or possibly a vestibule, you might call it, where perhaps there is a particular event that would happen here, or maybe you divest yourself of clothing or be looked after. And then you go through into the main Megaron room. And in front of you, you've got a round raised area that has the hearth, the fire on it, with an open roof above to let out the smoke. There are 4 columns around that hearth. And then off to the right-hand side in each Megaron, you've got the throne. So think about this. What are its features? Well, all the way through, your eyes are drawn to the hearth. You can see that through each door. So you're getting closer and closer to it as you enter. And as we can see from these reconstructions, they would have been highly decorated with beautiful frescoes around the wall, interesting, perhaps carved columns or at least painted columns. And even the floors and the ceilings are a myriad of beautiful geometric patterns and colour. So they're really drawing your eye all the way through. And then when you enter, you don't get to see the king until you've actually gotten into the main Megaron room at the end, where you would look at the throne from across the hearth, perhaps. For a start, you don't want to be able to see the king all the way through, or at least the king doesn't want you to be able to see him as you come in. He wants your entrance, seeing him, being impressive. Now let's think about why these are always the same. Well, that suggests a link between the people who built these, perhaps influences that have influenced each other, and there's also the idea that this is a really practical design. If we look at it, it does remind us a little bit of early temples in ancient Greece. How were these decorated? Well, again, they're all decorated to impress. Look at those frescoes, look at those patterns, look at that carving. So what does this suggest about its usage? This is a central focal point for administration, but also power. This is what you want to really show when people are coming to see you as ruler. You want to impress them before they've even seen you. And hopefully you want to then catch them by surprise when they're full of awe. If they're coming to ask you something, they're going to be a lot more grovelling by the time that they get here. Now, other evidence for palaces might be evidence from the Linear B tablets of positions in society, like the Wanaks, the Lawagetas, and the Hecatai, or perhaps evidence from the Linear B tablets of jobs within the society in the palace. There are women who do specific jobs listed. They grind corn, they spin and produce flax, they waitress, they are cupbearers, they are bath attendants, and they're also stated to come from other areas around the world, suggesting they may even be enslaved. But then we've also got female religious workers, priestesses, which would infer that they are higher status. And we've got other jobs that are done as well, headband makers for horses. Then there are musicians, but also sweepers, bakers, fire kindlers, perfume makers, and stonemasons. There's a real combination of high status jobs that are there for luxury, but there's also lots of very practical jobs, suggesting that the palace has had lots of things going on inside them. So again, look at this. What is the source? This is a Linear B tablet piece of information, and they were used to record important details. They weren't for telling stories, they were for listing things that were in the palaces. So where is it from and when, if you know? Well, these Linear B tablets tend to come from not long after they were originally made, because the tablet would normally crumble away, and these ones have been accidentally fired in whatever befell the end of the palace that caused a great fire. The limitations of these sources are that we don't know much more than these face-on facts from these. So we can't use it to tell a distinct story about a particular leader. But what they can do is give us an idea of the levels of society and the actual events that were going on in society within these palaces. I've cut this lesson up into chunks so you can more easily take in the information you need before going on to the next one. So, if you're ready, click on the next video in this series. And please subscribe, as it really helps me make these videos.